2004 when we left Los Angeles to 2015 when we moved to Atlanta, it was a mix of asset management, and I also consulted as a chef for a couple of different restaurants. I spent a lot of time cooking in those years where I was doing nothing, and that helped me when I got back to Orlando, which is kind of restaurant pops up every week there. That was something that I was able to do. I spent some time in Alaska, in California, Los Angeles cooking. So when I came home, that was something creative that I loved. I came on as a consulting chef. So I opened a few barbecue concepts, a couple Italian concepts, fast casual type stuff. And between that and real estate, that's what I was doing until I moved.
So you're a culinary type. What's your favorite dish?
Dish.
Or cuisine if you can't do just one. If you need a whole category, that's
You know
fine.
what's funny? I hate fish for the most part. I only eat a couple of types of fish, but I love shellfish. And I really love the California contemporary style of cuisine because it's a fusion of Mediterranean and Asian techniques with a lot of shellfish, a lot of pastas, a lot of good beef dishes. So I love California contemporary cuisine just because you can do so much with it and the products. Like I love Dungeness. I'm from Florida, but you keep your blue crabs. I only buy Dungeness. You know what I mean? And that was
Yeah.
something that I got introduced to out in the Pacific. And that's really my favorite type of thing to cook because it's fresh, it's versatile. You can use a lot of different products. You can use Asian influences. You can use Mexican, South American influences. You can use, artichokes and blue cheese if you like. Just the California contemporary cuisine has a lot of stuff you can do with it. It's not really bound by a lot of different flavor profiles or specific techniques. It's kind of free flowing and it's the Jeet Kune Do of the culinary world. You know what I mean?
For those who aren't aware of what a Dungeness crab is or Dungeness, I'm not entirely sure what the official pronunciation is. Is it Dungeness or is it Dungeness?
I don't know. I just know they're 4 times the size of blue crabs,
And they're
and that's worth my
delicious.
money. Yeah, they're
So
sweet. Yeah.
yeah, I believe they come from near Alaska, that Pacific Northwest area, and they are almost sweet enough to be a dessert and without anything on them. You don't need butter to make these things work. I mean, you can add it, and sometimes it's a benefit. Sometimes you're covering up the flavor of the meat. They are delicious, and they do sometimes have them frozen across the country. So if you've never heard it before, go check out Dungeness crab and give yourself a try to that, folks at home. You'll thank us. You'll thank Greg for bringing
Absolutely.
that up.
Absolutely.
That's cool. One thing I've noticed, because you mentioned how that California contemporary incorporates pasta, and you reminded me of when my wife and I went to Rome last year. And so I got a lot of fresh pasta, whereas previously I had just been, the stuff that gets rehydrated and then you make spaghetti here. And I said, wife, we should have a lot more of this. And she said, well, I got a pasta maker. And I asked, woman, you've been holding out on me all this time. You could have been giving me fresh pasta and you ain't been doing it. But bless her heart, she's gotten the thing out. She's been making me fresh pasta. Oh, it's just also, folks at home, if you haven't had fresh pasta, do the fresh pasta.
And it's
Treat
really
yourself.
not that hard. It's like flour, eggs, salt, oil. It's really simple to make the doughs.
Yeah. So thanks for the quick sum up of where Greg was before the film industry. Before we get into the film industry part of it, does any of the experience you gained from those previous jobs benefiting you now? Like the way you think, the way you plan, the way you organize your work?
Absolutely. And it's crazy because I tell people this all the time. Every bullshit job I ever had before somehow trained me for what it is I do now. I used to be a jungle cruise skipper at Disney as a high schooler. Taught me how to deal with audiences. I've worked in fast-paced restaurants in the kitchen where communication is imperative and so is speaking directly and working with urgency. The real estate thing taught me how to read legalese, taught me how to deal with contracts, B2B relationships. Working at the strip club taught me how to deal with different personalities. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. So everything along the way has kind of, even though I might have thought, oh my God, this is so dead end, I gotta get out of here. Little pieces of it I'm able to utilize all the time in the film industry and even in the creative spaces. So my mom was a 17-year military veteran. I spent a lot of time on military bases overseas, Italy, Turkey, all throughout the United States. And you can't really write anything if you don't have any stories to tell. You can create stories all day long, but if there's there's no gravitas, no perspective, no dimension to them, you don't create something three-dimensional for audiences. You just basically rehash what somebody else has done. So even that stuff, I pull from it all the time. I love going to places where I have to stand in line because I just pick somebody out in line and I try to see the world and conversations from their perspective. I try to be that person for a little while. And this is something I always did since I was a kid. All that stuff, somehow it's made me what I am. And when I was in jobs and in places where I thought this is never going to work to my benefit in any way other than a paycheck, I was wrong about 90% of it.
That's a great take. There's so much to that. I get younger writers, authors, adventure designers that I talk to, and I've got a longer track record of publications than they do. And so I've got a little more experience and I'm glad to help them out. But there's that question of what do I write? And the common answer to that is write what you know. Well, if you've never done nothing,
Right?
if you haven't experienced anything, if your heart hasn't been broken, if you ain't been on a bender and got hit by a car or whatever, now don't go do that. But I'm just talking about real world stuff that leaves a memory in you, a feeling in you, something interesting for you to tell folks about. Get you some life experience before you start writing anything or creating anything, because as we're going to cover in some of the stuff that Greg's written and directed later on, I'm sure some of what you lived through comes up in that.
Sure.
You seem like a man of good perspective. You've got your feet grounded in reality and life because you've been living it, right?
This is true. This is true.